special occasion. As a reminder, like with Shabbat Sovev, there's two handouts in the back, one in Hebrew and one in transliterated English, so that either way you can follow along whatever sheet is more preferable for you. Tonight, of course, is our annual. I will save saying anything about the pomp and circumstance for a little bit. I do think that it's worth mentioning before we start that, you know, I'm sure most of you are familiar with the at a Jewish wedding of breaking a glass, and the notion being that even when you're happy, there are things out there in the big wide world that are big and wide and scary. And since this group isn't always together and not always together on a Friday night, I think it's worth mentioning that there's a lot going on in the world out there. I figure that rather than say much about it, this morning I read something from a newsletter I like called Persuasion, whose editor lives in Jerusalem. His name is David Hamburger, and he wrote something called A Letter from an Israeli Shelter. The letter is 9 pages long, so I'm not going to read the whole letter, but I am going to read the very end of it. That's okay. And I think it's a good way to describe one person's way of how he's feeling, which I think is just kind of a good and healthy way to bring in Shabbat with both hope and anxiety. So he writes, in an hour or two, as I write this, the sun will set in Jerusalem, marking the beginning of Shabbat. Like last week, I will sit down and share in the traditional greeting, Shabbat Shalom. May it be a Sabbath of peace. Jews around the world will recite also a prayer that asks for the divine to spread over the world a Sukkot Shalom, a canopy of peace. Whether it will be a Sabbath of peace rests in the hands of young soldiers in Israel manning air defenses tonight, and with the leadership in Tehran and in Jerusalem. But for the sake of all of those Israelis and Iranians alike who find themselves spending tonight in shelters or in fear, let us hope the canopy holds. We're living in strange times, my friends. And you know, right now in Israel, it's the middle of the night, and I'm not checking my news right now to see what's going on, but I can only imagine. So for this moment, I'm going to be praying tonight that people can get a good night's sleep in their own bed, and not in a bed in a shelter, not where they're too afraid to fall asleep. With that, we'll transition to Kabbalat Shabbat and to our celebration, because ultimately we are here tonight to celebrate. So, Kabbalat Shabbat begins in the first box on the front page with Bo'i Hamalka. Bo'i Hamalka, Bo'i Hakala, Shalom Aleichem, Malchei HaShalom. Bo'i Hamalka, Bo'i Hakala, Shalom Aleichem, Malchei HaShalom. Bo'i Hamalka, Bo'i Hakala, Shalom Aleichem, Malchei HaShalom. Bo'i Hamalka, Bo'i Hakala, Shalom Aleichem, Shalom. We continue in the second box, Psalm 196, Shiru Ladonai. Shiru Ladonai, Shir Kadash, Shiru Ladonai, Kol Haaretz. Shiru Ladonai, Baruch Shemo, Basru Miyom Le'yom Yeshuato, Sapru Bagoyim, Kivodo, B'kol Ha'amim, Nikvotav, Ki Gadol Adonai, U'lam Me'od, Norahu, Akol Elohim, ay, 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 nine, 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 We continue on the bottom of the first page with Lachado D. We go from top to bottom and then left to right, in case you're wondering the orders of the various verses. Lechado di likrakala pene Shabbat nekabela Shamor bezachor bedibor echad Ishmiyanu el hamyukad Adonai echad u'shemo echad l'shemo tiferet v'litila Alechadoni likrat kala pene Shabbat nekabela Likrat Shabbat lechu benelcha ki mikor haberaka merosh mikedem nesuka sok maser b'machshava tehila lechadoni likrat kala Kene Shabbat nekabela Nai 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 Yaminu smolti proti bet Adonai ta'aritzi al yadish ben parti v'nismecha v'nagila lechadodi Olechadodi likrat face the door. Mo'i v'shalom, ateret bala, gam b'simcha u'v'tzola, tov emunei, am segula, bo'ei chala, olecha dodi likrat kala, pene Shabbat nikapela, olecha dodi likrat kala, pene Shabbat nikapela. You may be seated. If you are mourning or observing yahrzeit, we will recite Mourner's Kaddish. I'll read the yahrzeit names later in the service. If anyone is reciting Kaddish, please rise. Yit Gadal v'yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah v'yalma divarach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei v'chayechon u'yomechon u'chayei v'chol beit Yisrael Ba'agala ubizman kariv be'imru amen. Yehe shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam u'lamei ha'maya yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yipa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei kutsha b'richu le'ela min kol birkata v'shirata tushbekata v'nechemata damira b'yama v'imru amen. Yehe Shlomo Rabba min Shemaya, Mechayim Aleinu v'al Kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Yoseh Shalom v'imromav, Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu v'al Kol Yisrael v'imru amen. We rise on the backside of your sheets for the Baruch Hu, our call to prayer to begin the Mari service. Baruch Hu et Adonai. We continue quietly in the next paragraph. Chai v'kayam taminim loch aleinu le'olam bo'ed baruch atah Adonai ma'ariv harabim. We are in the second box for the Shema. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. 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 We rise for the Amidah meditation. As you know, there's a prayer that I use for reflection that you can read, or you can recite, of course, the traditional Amidah in your Sidurim. Please recite the Amidah in Hebrew or English, whatever language is most meaningful to you. Of course, this is also a perfect opportunity to offer your own personal prayers before God. Ose shalom bimrama, v'yase shalom aleinu, v'al kol Yisrael, v'al kol Yoshvei Tevel, v'imru, Yase shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol Yoshvei Tevel, ve'imru, Shalom b'roma, hallelujah, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol Yoshvei Tevel, ve'imru, amen. We are going to pause for the journal service portion of our service. Oh, Eli's leaving. Okay. I wrote some more detailed remarks in the journal, which you're free to read or not read. I at least hope that are in it, so read them. The rest of you, I'll leave it up to you. A rabbi cannot count the number of words that he might write in his career that no one will necessarily read. I don't take it personally. But, you know, I know I mention this every year, at least I've been, and this is my third journal service, not my third year yet, but my third journal service. I mentioned that I have this very soft spot in my heart for synagogue volunteers. Especially, it's partially due to being the child of two former synagogue presidents. And it's not that I don't get inspired, you know, from a great prayer experience or, you know, learning something really wonderful together. But for some reason, things that always warm my heart are little things like, you know, who shovels snow and puts down salt when there's ice in front of the synagogue and there's no one that's showing up that we pay to do it? Who is the person who gets called in the middle of the night when the alarm goes off and the police need to figure out if this is just a mistake, or something that actually is quite serious. Who are the people that make the makeshift games and contraptions that you use for a carnival or to put up a sign? These things warm my heart. They're not written about anywhere in the Talmud, and I've checked, because it would be great if there was. But it's these little, ordinary, simple things that that really just make me love being a rabbi of a congregation. Because every congregation, everywhere, no matter what size, has people like this. And I think that for all of you who came here tonight specifically because of the journal service, it is not in any way hyperbole to say that there's not an area of our synagogue that our honorees this evening have not touched. And I will let others tell more specific things, but there is no corner of this synagogue, and I do mean that sometimes in a literal sense, that they have not been or have had to do or have done something before. And it is a true privilege tonight that we get to honor Litza and Ari as our journal honorees. So with that, and I will now turn it over to the chair of our board, Eric Black. You're listed on the order here, is after me, so I'm just, follow my instructions. Okay, sure.
I like that there's overflow into the balcony. How many Astoria Center of Israel members does it take to screw in a light bulb? Anyone? 5 at a minimum, by my count. 1 to say they know a great electrician. 1 to suggest we get 3 bids. And 2 to argue over whether the light is really that bad. Do we need to replace the light bulb, or is it okay the way it is? And Ari, who just puts that light bulb in while everyone else is arguing over it. It's funny because it's true. And since Ari always takes off with a joke, I thought tonight it would be fitting for me to do that as well. I'm truly honored to stand here tonight to celebrate 2 people who don't just keep the lights on at ACI. They brighten the entire place. Litza and Ari are not only pillars of this community, they're 2 of my favorite people on this planet and cherished friends. Litza is the kind of person who sees something that needs doing and simply gets it done. No fanfare, just focus. Whether it's working on our website, keeping us all in the loop through the Friday flyer, leading social action initiatives, or tackling whatever needs her attention, she does it with quiet brilliance. Honestly, if ACI ever decided to expand and build a second sanctuary, Litza could design it, manage the construction, do a lot of the construction, and host the ribbon cutting. And Ari would happily do whatever he needed to do to help. Ari's leadership has shaped the modern soul of our show. His 14+ years as education chair brought structure and heart to our Hebrew school. And when he stepped into the role of president, just as I became board chair, well, let's say we had a little situation. Our rabbi had departed unexpectedly, and we were thrust into the deep end, managing operations, launching a search for a new rabbi, keeping the spirit of our community alive. It was, to be polite, a tumultuous time. But Ari's calm presence, his warmth, his quiet strength, they steadied the ship. He helped guide ACI not just through rough waters, but toward growth. With grace and humility, he modeled what true leadership looks like. And together, Litza and Ari are more than community leaders. They are hosts, mentors, friends. Their home has welcomed more ACI guests than ever, whether for holiday meals, Shabbat dinners, or just an open door and a kind word. They are witty, wise, generous, and grounded. A formidable pair and a force for good. Tonight we celebrate a partnership built on love, fueled by service, and anchored in community. Thank you, Litz and Ari, for everything you bring to ACI and to all of us. May your light continue to shine for many years to come. Invite Ali to come up and give her remarks.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I was asked today to speak here about my very good friend, Litza. Before I do just want to say that I feel equally as passionately about how much we all love Ari. So, not to leave him out in the cold, but I was incredibly honored to be asked here to speak about Litza this evening, who is someone I admire very much. I first met Litza and her wonderful boys by chance at the 31st Avenue Open Streets. Katie and I were out walking our dog when we saw a sucker being assembled and stopped to check it out. Minutes later, we were put to work, attaching walls, decorating, and setting out a vast collection of PJ library books. It was a truly welcoming environment that embodied the slogan that ACI would end up adopting later that year: Judaism with open arms. Litza is the embodiment of that phrase, if there ever was one. Litza convinced us to come and check out ACI just as it was in a major transition period. It encouraged us to get involved, and before I knew what had happened, I've been inspired to join several committees, because that's the kind of person that Litza is. Her passion and enthusiasm for the ACI community is infectious, as is her fervor for bettering the world that we live in, starting here in our local community. At ACI, Litza has worn just about every hat imaginable: committee chair, board member, Gold Star volunteer, diplomat, and the person you go to when you need anything done. Under the Gershon presidency, she practically lived here, and when she wasn't here physically, she was editing the Friday Flyer, doing deep dives into the membership list to make sure not a single person fell through the cracks, catering entire potlucks, organizing dozens of events and initiatives, or researching grant opportunities, the viability of major repairs, floors, air conditioning systems, or one of a million other things in this building. Thanks to an initiative that Litza started, we were able to bring ACI's membership management into the 21st century with Easy Shul. This is not an ad. Since then, our paid up membership has grown nearly 50%. Yes, 50%. Ensuring that ACI remains a thriving, sustainable home for Jewish life in Astoria and Western Queens. But what stands out most about Litza isn't just what she's accomplished, it's how she's done it. With grace, humility, and a sense of purpose that never wavers. She leads not for recognition, but because she believes in the power of community. She has a way of seeing not just what needs to be done, but who might be the right person to help do it, gently encouraging so many of us to step up, to contribute, and find our own place within this special community. And while we could fill several evenings just listing the many visible ways that Litza and Ari have contributed here, and I would have, but at least took under 3 minutes. There are countless moments behind the scenes that no one sees. The late night emails, the last minute phone calls, the quiet problem solving that keeps everything running smoothly. Because of Litza and Ari, countless families have found a home here. New members have been welcomed with open arms, committees have found their footing, and ACI has not just endured, but grown and thrived. On a personal note, and I know for many here, I am grateful not only for Litza's leadership, but for her friendship, for the countless conversations, the wise advice, the shared laughs, and the sense of community that she helps create here every single day. Litza, Ari, thank you for everything you've done, thank you for everything you continue to do, and thank you for the example that you set for us all. Mazel tov, Shabbat Shalom. Unfortunately, our president, Jen Abrams, could not be here this evening, but I would like to invite up our Vice Board Chair, Josh Abrams, to come and read prepared remarks by Janet.
Jen is truly sorry she could not make it tonight. She asked me to. read this speech. Any fault of it, please blame on me, not to wonderful words. But she's truly here in spirit. You know, we come together tonight to celebrate two extraordinary individuals. They've given so much to ACI in our community, Ari and Lisa. It's hard to even quantify how much you both have done to help us. You know, everyone here could probably come up and spend countless time talking about all the ways you've impacted each of our lives here. But for the sake of those delicious desserts outside, I'm just going to try to briefly summarize some things that you've done, but really, you could never say it all. Ari, you bring this deep sense of responsibility to everything you touch, whether it's Lainey, engaging with students and teachers at the Hebrew School, dealing with our insurance company's ever growing list of demands and questions, and most of all, making sure everyone who enters our doors feel welcome and heard. You have a gift for grounding tradition and relevance and reminding us that learning, it's a lifelong journey. It's because of Ari and Lisa that we even have this wonderful Hebrew school today that helps so many children and family in our communities. That alone is just astounding what you've done. And Lisa, with your calming presence, you've uplifted so many people in our community through your acts of kindness. And you've taken on so much work that's gone unseen, but it's never been unfelt. Your strength, creativity, and intelligence, your ability to bring us together in shul, it's not just a place of worship and learning, it's a true home for everyone in our community. Janet wanted to say one thing she personally loves is how you contribute during our open door Shabbos and all our other services, because your perspective, it's so insightful and well said. That's what Janet's word is, but everyone here can do. It's so true. Together, the both of you, you're a model of what it is to be and build a Jewish life. It's rooted in values, you're open-hearted in practice, and you're deeply committed to justice, connection, and joy. We're so lucky to have you as part of our ACI family. We're even luckier to count you as friends. Everyone in this room truly loves you. Thank you for all you've done. Toda Rabba, Ari and Lisa, for all you've given, for all the ways you continue to inspire us. Tikva l'mitzvot, may you continue to do good deeds, but not too many, because you frankly deserve a break. Now, the board, we'd like to present you with this gift. If you can please just come up, if you don't mind. And since we know you guys have a second home up in the Borscht Belt, we wanted to give you tickets to the Borscht Belt Festival. It's for the whole family, you get tickets to the museum as well, and funds for the subscription to the local theater in Ellenville. It's just a small token to celebrate all the wonderful things you've done.
Everyone give it up for Elisa, the chair of the journal. Good evening, everyone. My name is Elisa Blumenthal, and I am the chair of this year's journal fundraiser. It's a pleasure to see so many people turn out for this event to honor Ari and Litza. And I'm especially grateful if you communicated with me about your ad. I hope it's to your liking. There are copies of the journal in the back for you. When we sat down in a meeting this year to decide who would be the journal honoree, there was no deliberation needed whatsoever. It was unanimously Ari and Litza from the moment, from the get-go. And this made me think back to when I first met them at ACI. At that time, my husband and I began bringing our very young sons to the Center for Taught Shabbat.
and I admired Ari and Litz's good humor and seemingly endless patience as they, like Rafi and me, tried to navigate providing a Jewish life for our very high-spirited sons. One of the things that struck me during our planning for this event was that I mentioned, oh, I also have a simcha that day because my older son, congratulations, Jay. Immediately, other people in the meeting, the journal meeting, started saying, oh, there's a kindergarten, my son has a kindergarten moving up. And we came to find out that there were many graduations today: kindergarten, elementary school, middle school, high school, and even college. And I thought to myself, this is the Jewish community that Ari and Litza have built. Ari and Litza, through tremendous and relentless effort in our lives, but also when mutual support is needed to weather troubling times. And all those years ago in Tag Shabbat, when Josh was but a twinkle in Ari and Litza's eyes, there were a small number of very vibrant with some flowers, and give them a warm round of applause.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Thank you, Rabbi Josh and Josh Abrams and Ali and Lisa and Eric for your very kind words. Lisa and I are not accustomed to being showered with all this praise and accolades and approbations. Just not something we're used to. Boys, do you know that the couple they're talking about are the same people who live here? If you haven't been taking notes, I'll send you a transcript. Anyway, I've heard it said many times that parenthood is like running one of the most inefficient and dysfunctional nonprofits you can possibly run. First of all, membership is always bickering and complaining. And you're hemorrhaging cash. And the officer positions are lifetime appointments that don't let you resign. And at the end of every board meeting, it's left to the president and the chair to pick up food scraps from underneath the table. It's the most humiliating thing. But we abide. Actually, my boys have been very tolerant of us. They've been very patient. And I want to thank Eli, Ezra, and Joshua for being so accepting of the work and the time that we put into ACI's business. And I guess we'll find out years from now whether parental neglect in the service of the larger Jewish community is really the best strategy for building independence and resilience in your children. So a fifth grade teacher walks into a classroom and she says, boys and girls, if anyone here can tell me who the most famous person to have lived was, wins $5. So immediately, Seamus O'Brien raises his hand and says, St. Patrick. And the teacher says, Seamus, that's a very good guess. I'm sorry, you're wrong. Shaniqua Brown raises her hand and she knows the answer. She says, Abraham Lincoln. And the teacher says, Shaniqua, that's a great guess, but I'm sorry, you're wrong. And there's a long pause, and then Daniel Birnbaum from the back of the room raises his hand and says, Jesus. And the teacher says, yes, Daniel Birnbaum, you are right. Come up and claim your prize. So Daniel Birnbaum proudly walks in the back of the room, and the teacher says, Daniel, I'd like to commend you on getting the answer. You said Jesus with such conviction. I can't help but notice that you are Jewish, aren't you? So Daniel Birnbaum says, look, everyone knows the answer is Moses, but business is business. You do what you need. You do what's necessary. And this is a concept that defines most synagogues and defines the historic center of Israel. For decades, generations of people whose names are inscribed on the outside boards behind us and whose names are repeated every Shabbat morning by Rabbi Josh did what was necessary to continue the service of the building. They did what we needed to make sure that every generation had a community, a building, a congregation that was sustained and that was preserved by their predecessors and in turn by them, who assembled and contributed their time, their expertise, their energy, their resources, and who demonstrated commitments to ACI to make sure that it thrived. And Litzop and I are so humbled to be honored on what is the 100th anniversary of ACI. And I feel that, you know, we're not the ones who should be honored. It should be someone who devoted decades of their life to the Astoria Center Vision. You know, which would be an elder in the community. And then looking around the room, physically speaking, I realized with due exceptions, I am one of the elders in the community, which is okay, because I feel pretty good for my age, which means the rest of you must feel great, which bodes really well for us. But I cannot tell you how incredibly fortunate we are, both of us, to be part of a community that is now in its 100th year. And although we have a small paid staff, we have an abundance of volunteers who really continue to make the community what it is today. You know, Robert Jonathan Sachs said very eloquently, to be a member of a community is to be committed to the notion that the world is not yet complete, and we are called upon to be its co-creators. And so all of you who have spent time donating your time and volunteering, we thank you profusely for all your efforts. And those who are not sure whether you have the effort or whether you have the inclination or the ability, speak to our Josh or to Eric or Janet or myself, and I'm sure we can find a place for you to make a difference. You know, recently I've been reflecting on the decisions we make in life in general, or those that are made for us. And often they have consequential impacts beyond our immediate lives. Very often they impact others just as much or more. And I'm sure many of us here have thought about decisions that we have made when we were at certain crossroads in our life that have been very consequential. And some decisions are made in response to actions taken by others, and we have no control over them. But I'd like to share with you my experience that landed us here, and how I lurched from one impulsive, spontaneous decision to the next that explains how we are all here tonight. I can say unequivocally that if the events of September 11th had not happened, I would not be here. You would not be honoring me, and very likely ACI would be a different place, not better or worse, but a different place. Because after being a casualty of the 4th round of layoffs in my company, I decided to do something completely different. Rather than finding another job in IT and finance, I decided to take classes that had no bearing on my current profession in 20th century American drama, 19th century European literature, psychology, Greek mythology, creative writing. I decided to do something completely different and anathema to everything I had done up until that point. And then once my severance ran out, and I realized I needed to find a job because even 300 square feet in Brooklyn Heights is expensive, I saw this ad on the subway on the way up to the new school. And it said, it was from the teaching college program, it said, you remember your first grade teacher's name, who's going to remember yours? And I said, that's a great tagline, sign me up, I'm going to become a teacher. So at the risk of dispelling any notion that my decision to become a teacher was rooted in or motivated by some selfless benevolence or heartfelt commitment to Tikkun Olam, it was not. It was a spontaneous, impulsive decision to do something completely different. I felt like George Costanza in that episode of Seinfeld, when he laments to Jerry that his instincts throughout his life has led him towards failure, and he couldn't understand why. And then Jerry counsels him and says, look, if all your instincts were wrong, then do exactly the opposite of your instincts, and it's got to be right. And he takes Jerry's counsel, and sure enough, his fortunes turn around, and his social life improves, his professional life improves. But unlike George Costanza, who got a job at the New York Yankees, I got a job at the New York Board of Education, and I can tell you their pay scale is quite different. But you know, fortunately, none of my principals were like George Steinbrenner, so I was fortunate, except for maybe one. But I think it shows us that sometimes transformation begins with some self-awareness and some bold activity and actions and radical change. And I started becoming a math teacher in the Bronx, and then when the commute became too unbearable because I was living in Brooklyn, I started looking for a job in Manhattan. And this was in July of 2004. And I interviewed at about 6 different schools, but none can give me an offer at that time, except for one. It was a small school, and they had no reputation because they'd only been around for a year. I couldn't speak to students, I couldn't speak to any of the teachers, I couldn't speak to any of the parents. I only interviewed with the guidance counselor and the assistant principal, but they were willing to make me an offer, and I took it. And it was a big risk because I was operating against my better judgment, but it turned out to be the best decision because I made some wonderful friends who were my colleagues. And one of them, and we used to go out for drinks after school, but of course they were much younger than me, so I could not keep up with them. And I was exhausted because I was traveling from the Bronx to Brooklyn 3 times a week, and now I was still taking classes 3 times a week for my master's class. And but this one Friday night, I really didn't want to go out, but I forced myself to, and a bunch of us went to a bar, and one of my colleagues who was in the English department brought a friend of hers who was a roommate at the University of Delaware and told me about this beekeeping course that she took. And not to be outdone, I told her about the division of labor in the leaf cutting ant communities in Costa Rica because I had just been there. But I'm sure she can tell you about the life of bees and how they attract different bees to the source of food because she is seated right over here. Tell me about that. You know, sometimes you have to do the math when it comes to making decisions, but then sometimes you have to keep your fingers crossed and leap gracefully in, confidently into the unknown. The point is, you never know what impulsive decisions you make will turn into life-changing ones. And it was when, fast forward, it was when Lisa and I were shopping around for a synagogue, and we found one synagogue on the Upper West Side, and we loved the community. We fell in love with the rabbi, and the rabbi eventually married us. But after having kids, we knew we needed to find someplace more local, because although the M60 is very good when you're transporting luggage to and from the LaGuardia Airport, they're not very good when you're transporting kids in a double stroller. So we found the Story Center of Israel. Fast forward 10 years, one of the most challenging moments was when we were suddenly, in the spring of 2022, left without a rabbi, without an education director, and without any teachers. And it was one of the most challenging moments. And the question is, where do you begin? So after I filled his inbox with the emails that I sent to the director of student placement at Jewish Theological Seminary, Hebrew Union College, Academy of Jewish Religion, and emails to USCJ and New York Board of Rabbis and Central Conference American Rabbis and the Rabbinic Assembly, Eric convened a search committee that reviewed resumes and background checks and called references and conducted interviews. And I was so thankful to you for doing that because it showed me that I was not alone in this process. And it made all the difference. One of the rabbis I reached out to was the one who married us 14 years earlier. And a few weeks went by when I contacted him and he had not returned my email. I was a little concerned. And then I found out that he was on sabbatical that year. But his associate rabbi, Rabbi Yael Hammerman, got back to me and she said, you know, Rabbi Kamenetsky is on sabbatical, but I do have a brother who has a congregation in Westchester and is interested in finding another synagogue. It didn't work out because he was looking for a full-time job and we had a part-time rabbinical position. But a couple of weeks later, I get a call from Jen and he says, hi, this is Rabbi Josh Graven. You might have spoken to my wife, Rabbi Yael Hammerman. The point I'm trying to make is that you never know if where the connections that we make in life could eventually impact not just our lives, but the lives of others. And I'm reminded again and again how fortunate we are to have Rabbi Josh as our rabbinic leader in this community. And it's in moments like this that I'm reminded also of a quote by Emerson, which was sort of uncharacteristic of him because he was known for his individualism and self-reliance. He used to say, do not go where the path may lead, but go instead where there is no path and leave a trail. But Emerson was also known for his eloquent sayings and thoughtful sayings about the importance of connectivity and society and community. And he said the creation of 1,000 forests rests in one acorn, which metaphorically speaking suggests that one person or one act can have wide-ranging effects, especially when rooted in community. So to those who laid the foundation for the last 100 years in this community, and to those currently laying the foundation for the next 100, I thank you from the bottom of my heart for all the hard work that you do. And as for me, from one impulsive decision to another, I am grateful that ours brought us here. Thank you, and Shabbat Shalom.
I have a shorter selection of words so that we can get to those treats in the back. So what we do as volunteers, frankly, seems nuts sometimes. On top of all the obligations of our daily lives, our jobs, families, friends, our hobbies, we make time to do the unglamorous work of keeping this venerable institution running. It might mean joining conference calls late at night, setting up events early in the morning, sending out the Friday flyer every week, or maybe even building a giant PVC menorah in our living room. Why would anybody sign up to do all of this for free? I'm sure that Eli and Ezra and Joshua have asked themselves that question more than once as they watch both of us juggle our commitments. If I told my kids that volunteer work benefits me as much as it benefits ACI, they would probably roll their eyes, right, Joshua? But I hope that they're learning by example what I learned from watching my parents who are here tonight. That we gain something precious when we make it part of our routine to give of ourselves to our wider community. Through their example and through my own experience, I've learned that there are two things that I find essential for a meaningful life. We need to be useful and we need to belong. And volunteering gives us both. The work that we do doesn't just keep this organization running, it creates and strengthens webs of connectedness that extend beyond these four walls. Organizing the Sukkah building event on the 31st Avenue Open Street several years ago led me to meeting Ari for the first time. And she has since become an all-around volunteer powerhouse and a good friend. I was saying to her after her remarks that if I had done nothing more than bring Ari into the community, indicting her. Walking my kids to school in the morning has often turned into an impromptu ACI committee meeting when I run into Eric or Joanna, and we talk much longer than we intended about ACI affairs and everything beyond. I cannot imagine feeling as rooted in this neighborhood without the relationships and the rituals that have grown out of our work at ACI. Our most important contributions to the world aren't necessarily grand gestures. They're small moments that bring people together. When I was 17, I heard a poem that spoke to this idea, and I've reflected on it every few days over the past 30 years. I know that those closest to me have heard it before, but I want to share it with everyone tonight. This is Famous by Naomi Shihab Nye. The river is famous to the fish. The loud voice is famous to silence, which knew it would inherit the earth before anybody said so. The cat sleeping on the fence is famous to the birds, watching him from the birdhouse. The tear is famous briefly to the cheek. The idea you carry close to your bosom is famous to your bosom. The boot is famous to the earth, more famous than the dress shoe, which is famous only to floors. The bent photograph is famous to the one who carries it, and not at all famous to the one who is pictured. I want to be famous to shuffling men who smile while crossing streets, sticky children in grocery lines, famous as the one who smiled back. I want to be famous in the way a pulley is famous, or a buttonhole. Not because it did anything spectacular, but because it never forgot what it could do. So it is wonderful to be celebrated tonight, and it's a testament to the values of our community that we take time out to recognize the often invisible work that keeps this place going. But it's the work itself that gives us the chance to be famous in the ways that really matter. So thank you to everyone here tonight for giving us all the chance to help build something bigger than ourselves.
Before I turn the service back over to Rabbi Josh, I just want to thank a few people for helping to make this evening happen. First and foremost, I'd like to thank Ali Arenstam. Allie's ability to manipulate and streamline information allowed us to transform the decades-old tradition of the journal, which was a bit fraught with tremendous overhead costs. She turned it into a sleek and organized digital production. Allie, I really can't thank you enough for answering every question and being so generous with your time. I appreciate your ability to identify and solve problems before I even realized that they were happening. If you haven't seen a copy of the journal itself, the publication where you've placed a number of tribute ads, there are copies around, and I think, Allie, there might be some behind you that we can distribute at the end of the service.
There's also QR codes at the back.
And there are QR codes that Rafi, my amazing husband, is holding up in the back if you don't want to take home a paper copy, but you'd like to just peruse it online at your convenience. I would also like to thank my husband Rafi and my sons Jacob and Max for their mostly good-natured patience with me when I launch into journal mode at the beginning of April and stay locked in until the end of June. On the positive side, I now know how to make your school presentations look so slick in Canva. I'd like to also take a moment to thank Mitch and Sue Ann for sponsoring the beautiful floral arrangements that are here this evening. They're really exquisite. Thank you so much. I'd like to thank Joanna and the honoree herself, Litza, for ensuring that this fundraiser and event were well publicized across all of our digital and communication platforms and social media. I'd also like to thank my parents, Ralph and Marcia Jacobs. Thank you so much. The center is so grateful to you for sponsoring tonight's dessert reception, which will be immediately following the service. Of course, as always, thanks to Rabbi Josh for taking on this dear old tradition here at ACI and bringing it forward into his time as our clergy here. Finally, I'd like to thank our amazing office administrator, Lizanne, for the beautiful way that she set up both the foyer, the Ladies Guild room, and the chapel for the dessert reception today. We are so grateful for her help in making these events so beautiful and run so smoothly. At the conclusion of the service, please join us for some sweet treats out in the lobby. We have had the AC blasting all day in the chapel and in the Ladies Guild room. Sorry for our costs for energy, but it is essential. So please feel free to take your treats after the service and then move into one of the cooler spaces on either side of the foyer. So thank you so much for coming, and I'd like to hand the service back to Barbara.
As we wrap up for the evening, and I say this actually good-naturedly, there was a lot to be said this evening, and that's okay. As many of you know, I'm a habitual watch checker of myself, but there was a lot to be said this evening because I think that there was a lot of things that people wanted to say to these most deserving honorees. And in that sense, it was totally worth it because they deserve it. And so with that, we're going to transition from that to reading the Yorksite list and back into the world also as it is. Tonight begins the 20th day of the month of Sivan. This week we observe the following Yorksites here at ACI. Morris Brecker, Philip Levitas, Rose Nissenblatt, Margit Cohn, Abraham Shevath, Benjamin Rosenberg, Julian Young, Isaac Jacob Levinson, Clara R. Radin, Haiti Kazauer, Jenny Hoffman, Isidore Gang, Morris Rosenbaum, Celia Wolf, Allegra Yochai, David C. Moss, Raquel Weiss, Rachel Weiss, Carrie Berg, Leanne Berg, Rose Dash, Celia Gintel, Hyman Gross, Frank Goldstein, Minnie Bernstein, Regina Schlansky, Rose Lippman, Anna Fishbein, Bertha Klein, Simon Nissenblatt, Walter Meyer, Gary Koretsky. Those who are mourning, those who are observing Yorksite, please rise for the Kaddish Tome, the mourner's Kaddish. Yit Gadal Kadash Merava, Bialma Zivarach Yurute, Biamlif Malkute, V'chayechon, Yomechon, V'chaye Yechol Beit Yisrael, V'agala Bizman Karivi Amen, Yehe Shmer B'mavarach, Le'olam L'mel Maya, Yitbarach, V'yishtabach, V'yipar, V'yitromam, V'yitnaseh, V'yithadar, V'yitaleh, V'yitalal, Shmer Kudsha, V'yikud. Le'ela min kol birkata v'shirata, tushbekata v'nechamata, damiram b'yalma v'yivramein, yehe shlam araba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu b'yal kol yisrael v'ramein, oseh shalom b'mramav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu b'yal kol Yisrael v'yivru, amen. Only quick announcements for this evening is, of course, Elisa already described, that stay and eat and enjoy dessert. Number one. Number two, of course, I hope to see all of you here tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock for Shabbat morning services. And I mean that sincerely. I will see many of you tomorrow morning. And with that, we'll conclude singing of Adon Olam. Please remember to include, put your handouts back in the, just back on the two piles so that I can save them and save the trees by not having to make new copies every time. Bottom of the back half, the back side of the page. Adon Olam, Hashem Allah, B'ter Kol Yitzir Nivra, Le'ed Nasa B'chapso Kol Azai Melech, Shemo Nikra, Azai Melech, Shemo Nikra, Ve'akarei Kiklot HaKol, Imlo Nora, Vehu Haya, Vehu Obed, Vehu Yeh, V'tzipara, Vehu Yeh, V'tzipara, Vehu Echad Ye'eseni L'am, Shelo L'had Mira, V'li Reishi, V'li Tabli, V'lo Ha'oz, V'ham Yisra, V'lo ha'oz v'ham yisra, v'hu eli v'chai go'ali v'tzor, kavli v'etzara, v'hu nisi u'manosli menakosi v'yom ekra, menakosi v'yom ekra, v'adon Adonai leave below Yira. Shabbat shalom, everybody. Okay, whose is it?